Hello, this is your friendly neighborhood Corey. I'm rereading through J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and I'm beginning, of course, with the Fellowship of the Ring. And I thought I would just give some brief thoughts after each chapter, since I haven't read this series in over 10 years. However, I've been inundated with Peter Jackson's Fellowship of the Ring for many, many years, watching it almost annually for a good long while. And I thought it about time I revisit the actual text and tried to see what the difference would be like going through it all over again, since it has been some years and decades. So, this is my very, very brief first thoughts that kind of struck me and stuck out to me personally in chapter one. So many things have been said about this series over the many decades since its release that I cannot contribute or add anything else to that endeavor except for some personal anecdotes about my rereading, and that is all that this content will consist of. It is by no means a review. It is not going to go through any of the details of the story except for where it might have stood out to me as something interesting that I hadn't quite noticed before. So, without further ado, here are the things that kind of popped out to me as I reread the first chapter of Fellowship of the Ring, A Long Expected Party. So, one of the things that I thought was quite interesting was that for some reason I hadn't remembered was that the birthday party of Bilbo, not only was it his 111th birthday, which is in the film, um, and that's something that I've seen ad nauseum. But I had forgotten that it was actually Frodo's birthday as well. It was sometime in September. I just read the chapter, but I'm not looking at it, so all these details are subject to being an error. But sometime in September, maybe September 22nd. Um, but at any rate, I had forgotten the fact that it was also Frodo's birthday. He turned 33 on the day of the long expected party, and that was one of the reasons it was a date of special significance because at the age of 33, hobbits basically, that's the age that hobbits become adults. They're considered children through their 20s, and at the age of 33, they kind of come into their own legally. And that was one of the reasons Bilbo was able to leave because he was able to um, let Frodo inherit Bag End when he was 33 years of age. That way, his inheritance would go to Frodo and not to the Sackville Bagginses. So the real special detail is kind of a thread that I had missed was really the birthday being special was the fact that Frodo was turning 33, not just that, Bilbo was of this spectacular age and didn't look like he had actually aged because of what was, obviously happening to him due to the ring. But none of that really was the important detail. The real important detail was that Frodo was 33, he was of age, and he could inherit Bag End. Therefore, Bilbo was able to leave everything to him and feel good about it, and then, sort out his issues and go on a new adventure. I was also struck by the fact that, he had included Gandalf and Frodo on his intentions to leave and leave everything to Frodo and his intentions to also even use the ring and vanish in front of people at the party. Um, Frodo and Gandalf were in on that, but Gandalf puts up with Bilbo and his silly plans and pranks, but only to a point. And him including that flash that happened when Bilbo vanished is not something you get in the film. So that was something that I had remembered once I read it again, but not something you get when you're watching the movies only. And it was also revealed in the text. I thought it was an interesting detail that the only thing that Gandalf revealed that he thought was a good idea about this entire party and leaving the Shire in such a fashion was that Bilbo had also promised the ring to Frodo. He mentions it explicitly in the text that the only good thing he thought was going to come of this craziness was the fact that he was leaving Frodo everything, including specifically the ring, which he felt, odd that certain things were happening to Bilbo and started to be suspicious of the ring. But he was very happy that that was part of the plan. One of the reasons he was trying to force Bilbo to stick to that part of the plan because that was the one part that he thought was a good idea. Um, and then rereading passages of Bilbo feeling thin and stretched was interesting to read, kind of the extended version of that when that's a part of the movies that really pops for me. The Fellowship of the Ring film, the theatrical cut specifically, is my favorite of those movies. And I remember when I read these the first time, and probably the last time that I'd read them, was in the mid to late 1990s. And I remember when I read them, I read The Hobbit first, then I read Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and Return of the King. And my favorite book was Return of the King. Each of the Lord of the Rings books, setting The Hobbit to one side, each of the Lord of the Rings books progressively got more and more interesting to me as I read them. And the exact opposite was the case with the movie experience. For me, going to the movies, the first movie was the best, most faithful, most awesome of the movies. And then the second one was less, like the worst one. And then the Return of the King was like the second best one. It kind of got a little better than Two Towers. But for me, the best movie in the whole thing is the theatrical cut of the first film, The Fellowship of the Ring. Whereas in the books, my favorite book back in when I was reading these for the first time was by far The Return of the King. So I'm very interested to see, God willing, I'm able to finish these three books again. If I'm able to make that journey there and back again, I'm very curious to see if my opinions of the books are the same as far as my favorite being The Return of the King, and how I liked Two Towers better than I liked Fellowship, and I liked Return of the King better than I liked Two Towers. I'm curious to see if that will hold as I have aged since I read these last. So I think that's just about it. Oh, there was one other detail that I thought was interesting. Um, in the book, Gandalf actually touches the ring, whereas in the film, he can't really touch it. Whereas it seemed like the real key to transferal of the ring's ownership was the previous owner gifting it to the other person, kind of giving it to them. Because Gandalf objects strongly when he says, don't give it to me, because Bilbo's talking about giving it to Gandalf, and a lot of the conversations there with Bilbo they kind of gave to Frodo in the film, but I haven't read the second chapter yet to know if that's 100% true or not. It just seems like some of Bilbo's lines in that first chapter at the end were given to Frodo, and I know they did a lot of that in the movie. They gave certain lines that one character would say in the books to a different character, just a part of the adaptation process, which I respect and believe is required for anything that's being taken from one medium to another. So, yeah, just interesting that Gandalf seemed to be able to touch the ring without any problems, and it seemed to be highlighted that giving it to him was something he didn't want. So, just interesting thoughts. I believe that's everything. If not, I will stop this, cut in anything I missed. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all in the second chapter of the Fellowship of the Ring entitled Shadow of the Past. Toodaloo!